They say you can't outrun your past. For 20 years, I thought I had. I built a new life, a successful one. But sometimes when the rain falls just right on the city streets, I remember. I remember the heat, the hunger, and the girl in apartment 8. I remember her kindness and the terrifying debt we owed her after she died.
I stand by the glass, watching the river of traffic flow through the city canyon below. It's changed so much. The narrow alleys and crumbling tenements I once knew are gone, replaced by gleaming towers of steel and light. A sudden squall, the first of the season, sweeps through, and the streets glisten, reflecting the neon glow. Today is a significant day, a day I shouldn't be remembering. But there comes a time in every man's life, I suppose, when he looks back and asks himself what he's truly been through. 20 years ago, I stood before a window just like this one, only it was in a cramped, rotting apartment, suffocatingly hot even late at night. Back then, I was just Ethan, a college kid from out of state, crammed into a tiny room with my 2 best friends.
Life was nothing more than a long, grueling struggle for rent and food. A decent meal was the stuff of dreams, dreamt on an empty stomach. And then there were the people I've never been able to forget. It all started on a sweltering May afternoon in 2003. The afternoon in apartment 7 of the Crestview building, a name far grander than the reality, was like any other, suffocatingly hot, with nothing to look forward to but a packet of instant ramen softening in a dented aluminum pot.
I sat cross-legged on the cement floor, stirring the noodles with my chopsticks. The heat rose to my face, a mixture of dried onion, cheap seasoning, and the faint, metallic smell of the old electric kettle. Leo, my roommate, took a sip of the broth from the lid and grimaced. "This ramen tastes weird today," he muttered. "Probably the water. Think you boiled eggs in it yesterday and forgot to change it." "You're the one who boiled the eggs," I retorted, my eyes fixed on the noodles. They were all we had left for the day. A resigned silence settled over the room, a space not much larger than a walk-in closet, with walls that looked like a map of water damage. This was the reality for 2 broke students from nowhere. 2 packs of 25-cent ramen shared with a few leftover strands of stir-fried cabbage from the day before.
Just then, the sound of high heels clicked on the concrete floor of the hallway. We both looked up. The first shadow that passed our open door belonged to a young woman. A wave of expensive-smelling perfume drifted in after her. She wore a long dress. Her hair was softly curled, and her figure was undeniably stunning. Trailing her was our landlady, Mrs. Gable, jingling a small key in her hand. A new tenant, I figured. People came and went from this place all the time.
But it wasn't the woman who made me frown. It was the person hunched over behind her, hauling 2 enormous bags. I squinted, then sat up straight. "Hey, is that Jake?" Leo leaned forward. It was him, all right. The same slightly stooped posture he adopted whenever he was trying to look helpful. We exchanged a look, and then both scrambled to the doorway, poking our heads out. In the hall, Jake was grinning from ear to ear, a suitcase in one hand and a heap of miscellaneous bags in the other. The woman would occasionally look back and say something, and Jake would just nod enthusiastically like a loyal soldier. The door to apartment 8, right next to ours, creaked open. Mrs. Gable handed over the key. The woman murmured a quiet thank you. Her perfume lingered in the air. Jake, Leo, and I were inseparable. We were all engineering students at Northwood State. We couldn't stay in the dorms because we all had to work odd jobs at night to survive. So, for the past 2 years, we pooled our resources to live in this cramped little hellhole. None of us came from money. We were all just kids from small towns, getting by on whatever cash our families could spare each month, supplemented by a patchwork of part-time gigs. Handing out flyers, bussing tables, tutoring, sometimes even standing at intersections offering free samples.
I was the level-headed one, the practical mind who tried to keep us grounded.
Leo was the quiet one, always lost in a book, usually a horror story. The guys joked that he was a bit of a weirdo, but he was a deep thinker. He'd sometimes use the occult knowledge he picked up from his books to give strange, unsolicited advice to anyone who would listen.
And Jake, well, Jake was the smooth talker, the charmer who could talk his way into getting anything for free. He was carefree and fun-loving, but he was the one who got into the most trouble.
He stumbled back into our room a few minutes later, plopped down on the floor mat, and immediately ripped off his sweat-drenched t-shirt, tossing it onto his bed with a wet smack. He paid no mind to the sour smell that instantly filled the air. God, this heat is gonna kill me, he groaned, half complaining, half bragging about his heroic feat. Felt like I was hauling water up a mountain carrying those bags. Who was that? A friend of yours? I asked. Huh? Who? Jake looked blank for a second. Then a sly grin spread across his face. Oh, the lady? Nah, no idea. Never seen her before. She was just so damn beautiful, I had to jump in and help. You can't let a goddess carry her own luggage, man. It's just not right. Leo just grunted, a flat, uninterested sound. He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes, and checked out of the conversation. But Jake was just getting warmed up.
Dude, that woman is something else. Seriously, classy as hell. That perfume she was wearing, that wasn't the cheap crap the girls in our classes spray on. And her stuff, all designer brands. The kind of stuff you see on those old MySpace celebrity pages. Pure luxury. I didn't say anything, just went back to my noodles. I hated this kind of gossip, especially about someone we just met, based on nothing but a superficial once-over. But Jake was on a roll. I bet she's some rich guy's mistress. He probably got tired of her, cut her off, and now she can't afford a nice place anymore. So here she is, moving into this shithole with the rest of us.
I frowned and put my chopsticks down. Dude, stop talking about her like that. She just got here. You don't know anything about her, so don't just invent a whole backstory. Hey, I'm not inventing anything, he shot back, defensive. I'm just observing. Call it a situational assessment. She's our next-door neighbor. It's irresponsible not to do a little research. You gotta be vigilant. We're her next-door neighbors too. She's not talking crap about us, I said, my voice sharp. Jake went quiet for a beat. He rolled onto his back, throwing an arm over his forehead, and sighing like a world-weary old man. Whatever, man. All I'm saying is, for someone that beautiful and that classy to move into a dump like this, it's not normal. Something's up. From his corner, Leo let out a soft chuckle. It was impossible to tell if he was laughing at my earnestness or Jake's melodrama. Knock, knock. The soft rap on our door made all three of us freeze. Jake shot up like he'd been electrocuted. Who is it? He called out, his voice suddenly shifting, becoming as sweet as honey.
The wooden door creaked open. It was her, Chloe. She stood there in a simple beige dress, her hair tied back neatly. In her hand, she held a plastic grocery bag. Inside, I could see a few bagels wrapped in deli paper. "I brought you guys some food," she said, her voice soft and pleasant. "You helped me so much earlier. I wanted to say thank you." Jake's smile nearly split his face in two. He rushed forward to take the bag. "Oh, wow, Chloe, you really didn't have to. It was nothing, really. Just carried a few bags, that's all." "It was a big help," she insisted. smiling as she glanced past him into our room. "Are these your roommates?" "Yep, my two best friends," Jake announced proudly. "We're all at Northwood State together, all broke and starving together, too." His self-deprecating humor made Chloe laugh, a genuine light sound. She gave a small nod to me and Leo. We both felt a little awkward, but we managed to stand up and say hello. "Well, I'll let you get back to it. Share those with your friends." She turned to leave, and that lovely, expensive scent drifted past our door one more time. Jake closed the door and turned around, shaking the bag of bagels like a trophy. See? Who's the reason you're not eating ramen for dinner tonight?" He pulled out the bagels one by one, distributing them like prizes. One for Leo the Grump, one for Ethan the Buzzkill, and one for today's hero, Jake the Handsome. I took the bagel, but didn't say anything. I held it in my hand, watching the cream cheese begin to soak into the paper wrapper. I glanced over at the closed door of apartment 8, a strange, formless anxiety coiling in my gut.
After the bagel incident, Chloe was no longer a stranger to the three of us in apartment 7. She wasn't overly friendly or intrusive, but she never failed to smile and say hello when we crossed paths. And every so often she would leave us a little something, a lifeline. A few slices of leftover pizza, a couple cartons of milk, even a can of fancy tuna. At first we were too proud to accept, but on those long afternoons when we came home to nothing but stale water and a bag of ramen nibbled on by mice, the sight of a food container from Chloe felt like a miracle.
Jake was the closest to her. He was still the same smooth talker, but he'd upgraded his flattery game. Anytime he saw Chloe coming down the hall carrying something, he'd dart out like a bullet to help her, showering her with compliments. "Chloe, you look like a movie star today. Seriously, best dressed person in this whole neighborhood, hands down." She would just smile, never responding to his more over-the-top lines, but she never pushed him away either. Jake had a knack for reading people, for saying just enough to be charming without being annoying. Because of that, Chloe gradually started treating him like a favorite younger brother.
Leo was different. He kept his distance at first, offering only a curt nod when they passed. But one evening, Chloe brought over 2 plates of roast chicken, simply saying, "I ordered too much." Leo took his plate without a word, but the next day, when he saw her at the bottom of the stairs, he actually stopped for a moment. "The chicken was really good," he said. "Thank you." That was it. But for Leo, who you practically had to pry words out of, that was a whole speech.
As for me, I wasn't a great talker like Jake, nor could I feign a casual intimacy. But after accepting her food a few times, I felt a desperate need to repay her in some way. One day, I saw her struggling to change a burnt-out bulb in the hallway, so I ran over and did it for her. Another time, I helped her drag the overflowing trash bins to the curb or unclog the sink in her apartment. She never asked for help, but she never refused it either. Each time, she would just offer a soft smile and a simple, "Thank you, Ethan." Those 2 words were enough. They made me feel useful, and they eased the uncomfortable feeling of always taking and never giving. The dreary old apartment building started to feel a little less oppressive, as if a beautiful patch had been sewn onto a ragged piece of cloth. Our meals were no longer just ramen and cloudy tap water. Some nights we had fish soup, or scrambled eggs with ground pork, or even a small tub of ice cream. Every time, Jake would nudge us and gloat, "See? Stick with me and you'll eat like kings." Leo would sigh and I would shake my head, but we both knew that these small moments, however fleeting, were a rare light in the hardship of our student lives.
It was June in the city, and the sun beat down on the thin tin roof, turning our room into an oven. The fan, running at full blast, did little more than push the hot air from one corner to the other. Leo and I sat across from each other,
mountains of notes and textbooks between us, our backs slick with sweat. No one complained. Finals exams were just around the corner, and failing a few classes meant risking graduation. The only sounds were the turning of pages and the scratching of pens. Finals are in a week, and Jake hasn't touched a single book, I said, my eyes glued to a page of formulas. He's probably studying with his sixth sense, Leo replied, without looking up. His sixth sense only activates when he sees a pretty girl.
Before I could finish the sentence, the door slammed open. Jake strode in, his face grim. He kicked the door shut behind him, then rushed to the window, slamming it closed and pulling the ragged curtain down. Leo frowned. "What the hell is your problem?" "You guys, get over here," Jake hissed, his voice low and urgent. "I have something insane to tell you." Leo and I exchanged a weary glance and reluctantly put our pens down. Jake dropped to the floor between us, took a deep breath, and lowered his voice even further. "I was over by the downtown club district this morning. You know the area, full of high rollers, guys with big bellies and shiny cars." "And?" I prompted, failing to see the point. Jake leaned in closer, emphasizing every word. "I was waiting for the bus, and I saw Chloe." The room went silent. "I'm not mistaken," he insisted, seeing our disbelief. "She was wearing this tiny, tight dress and carrying a glittery little purse. She was standing right outside the club, laughing and talking with these fat old guys getting out of a black Lexus. As soon as one got out, she just wrapped her arm around his. There were other girls there too, wearing even less than she was." "Are you sure it was her?" Leo asked quietly. "Of course I'm sure. I'm not blind," Jake snapped. "I knew it all along. A single girl, living alone, with all that money and no obvious job. If she wasn't working in a place like that, I'll eat my own head." Leo's brow furrowed slightly. I looked down, my hand tightening around the textbook in my lap. Jake, feeling vindicated, kept going. "Whatever, man. It's her life, and I gotta admit, she looked damn good. Standing there looking like that, I mean, I wonder if she gives a student discount." "Shut up, Jake!"
I looked up, my voice hard. "I'm serious. Chloe has helped us. She's treated us like little brothers. I don't care what she does for a living. The food she gave us, the bagels she bought when we were starving. We ate them. We should be grateful, not sit here tearing her down like this." "Hey, I'm just telling you the truth," he stammered. I stood up, staring directly into his eyes. "Even if it is the truth, there's a right way to talk about it. We have no right to judge her. It's disgusting to sit here, with her food still in our stomachs, and talk about her like that." The air in the room turned cold. Jake looked at me, then at Leo, half wanting to argue, half wanting to back down. In the end, he just stayed quiet, scratching his head before flopping onto his back on the floor. The idle chatter was gone, replaced with a heavy silence, filled only with the sound of turning pages and the occasional weary sigh.
The hushed arguments about Chloe became less frequent, replaced by a tense, heavy quiet. Though Jake would still spew his crude theories in front of us, he remained the perfect, helpful little brother whenever he saw her. He was a chameleon, adapting his colors to get what he wanted. One afternoon, he came back to the room with a brown cigarillo perched between his fingers. He wasn't smoking it, just holding it, occasionally bringing it to his nose to inhale the scent with the air of a seasoned connoisseur. Leo and I exchanged a look, shaking our heads in weary resignation. We didn't even have to ask where he got it. I ignored him, trying to nudge him back to reality. "You need to study, man. Finals are coming up." Jake just grinned, his eyes lighting up as he pulled a chair over, sitting down between us. "Don't you worry about that," he said, his voice slick with conspiracy. Chloe just lent me some money. So, I asked, not seeing the connection, what does that have to do with your exams? So, he said, leaning in, I'm paying a senior to take the tests for me. Simple.
Something in my chest tightened. I looked at Jake, searching for the friend I used to know, the goofy, charming idiot I grew up with. All I saw was a stranger, his face twisted with a cynical, lazy pragmatism. Then why are you even in college? Just drop out if you're not going to do the work. You borrowed money from her for something that stupid? Being called out, and in such a judgmental tone, pricked Jake's fragile ego. He shot up from his chair. It's my life, all right? Stop trying to lecture me all the time. He snatched his t-shirt from the bedpost, slung it over his shoulder, and swaggered out of the room, trying his best to look like he didn't care at all. Leo just sighed softly and turned another page in his book. That night, Jake didn't come home. The apartment felt strangely peaceful without him. It was just me and Leo, sitting in silence around our meager dinner. The money our families had sent this month was already half gone, spent on tuition fees. The rest had to be stretched to cover rent. Dinner for two was a small plate of salty fried shrimp and a bowl of watery soup, eaten with leftover rice from the day before.
Just as we were about to finish, a familiar voice, weak and trembling, called from the doorway. "Ethan? Leo? Are you home?" It was Chloe. We looked at each other, then peered out. She stood under the jaundiced glow of the hallway light. She was wearing a tight black dress and heavy makeup, clearly dressed for a night of work. But what caught my attention was how pale her face was, her eyes sunken and exhausted. In her hand, she held that same kind of plastic bag with the vague shapes of a few tin cans inside. She held the bag out to me. "I have some canned fish. Take them for later." I immediately waved my hands, refusing. A flicker of masculine pride, or maybe just shame, stopped me from taking yet another handout from her, especially after what Jake had said. No, it's okay, Chloe. We're fine. My family just sent money. We just finished dinner, see? Please, take it. She shook her head, and her voice held a strange urgency I'd never heard before. She stepped closer, trying to force the bag into my hand. I need to ask you two for a favor." The moment her fingers brushed against mine, a sudden, shocking cold shot up my arm, making me flinch and pull my hand back. It wasn't the chill of a person feeling unwell. It was an inert, soulless cold, like touching a block of ice. I stared at her, alarmed. "My God, are you sick? Your hand is freezing."
She didn't seem to hear me. Her eyes darted nervously toward the end of the hall. I followed her gaze and saw the lurching, unsteady figure of Jake appearing at the far end. He wasn't even close, but we could already hear his voice, drunkenly slurring the words to some pop song. As soon as the sound reached us, Chloe's expression went blank. For a split second, I could have sworn her eyes were just two deep black pits, her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, but I must have imagined it. I blinked, looking from Jake back to where she stood. She was gone. There was no sound, no movement. One moment she was there, the next, the space was empty. All that remained was the plastic bag on the damp cement floor, a few cans of fish rolling out. I stood there, stunned. That's weird as hell, I thought. She was right here. How did she disappear the second she heard Jake? I scanned the empty hallway, then shook my head, trying to dispel the bizarre feeling. I bent down, gathered the cans, and stepped back inside. The next morning, to repay her for the fish, Leo and I dragged an old, broken wooden shelf out into the courtyard. We planned to fix it up and give it to Chloe to use as a shoe rack when she got home. The rhythmic sound of our hammers
echoed in the quiet morning air. As we worked, we saw Mrs. Gable walking down the hall, followed by a man carrying a heavy toolbox. They walked straight to apartment 8. Seeing this, we stopped what we were doing and drifted closer. When we got there, Mrs. Gable was pointing at the lock on Chloe's door. "Cut this thing off for me," she told the handyman. Leo and I looked at each other. Something was wrong. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Gable?" I asked. "Why are you breaking into Chloe's room? She usually works late and doesn't get back till noon."
"She's not coming back," the landlady said flatly. "The precinct just called. She died yesterday. They found her body on the street somewhere." She sighed, annoyed. "Didn't have a single piece of ID on her. Lucky for them, I gave her that handwritten temporary residence slip. Otherwise, they'd have no idea who to call." The hammer slipped from my hand and clattered onto the concrete. Both of us froze, the blood draining from our faces. Leo stammered, stepping forward as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What? Chloe's dead? How?" Mrs. Gable waved her hand impatiently at the handyman, urging him to cut the lock. "An overdose, looked like it. Happened yesterday afternoon, the cops said. See, I knew she was no good the day she moved in. What decent girl dresses like that, coming and going at all hours of the night? Now I have to clear out her junk, see if there's anything valuable I can sell to cover her last month's rent." An icy dread washed over me. I looked at Leo and saw the same nameless fear reflected in his eyes. If Chloe died yesterday afternoon, then who was the person who pressed that bag of fish into my hand last night? I suddenly remembered her ice-cold fingers, her sudden, impossible disappearance. The lock snapped. The door to apartment 8 swung open. Mrs. Gable saw us standing there, two able-bodied young men looking utterly shell-shocked. "You two got nothing to do right now? Help me pack her stuff into boxes and haul it to storage. I'll give you a few bucks for lunch." Leo and I looked at each other, sadness and confusion warring on our faces. We said nothing, just gave a silent, grim nod and followed her into the apartment that no longer had a tenant. Inside, the room was nothing like her flashy exterior. It was neat, clean, almost stark. A few outfits hung tidily on hangers. Toiletries were arranged in a perfect line on a shelf. As I was clearing out a drawer, my fingers brushed against a small photograph hidden beneath a stack of clothes. In the picture, an unmade-up Chloe was wearing a simple shirt, her arms wrapped around two small children, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Her smile was radiant and peaceful, a look of genuine happiness I had never seen on her face before. I don't know what possessed me, but I glanced around, and when no one was looking, I quickly slipped the photo into my pocket.
We finished the grim task and returned to our room, the weight of the day pressing down on us. Neither of us spoke. The already small room felt suffocating, filled with a silent, mournful atmosphere. My gaze was fixed on the cans of fish, stacked neatly on my desk, the final gift from a dead woman. My throat felt tight, my eyes burned. The image of Chloe's pale face and her freezing hands kept replaying in my mind, terrifyingly real.
Leo, meanwhile, walked quietly to his corner of the room and pulled out his collection of old, yellowed books. His library of ghost stories and paranormal research. He carefully sifted through them, stopping at a page marked with a crease. He placed the open book on the table between us. In the quiet room, his voice was low and steady. Maybe Chloe really did come back to find us last night. It says in here, when a person dies with an unfulfilled wish or a powerful attachment to the world, their spirit can't move on. They often return to a familiar place to seek help. I was silent.
I'd never believed in ghosts, but what had happened was too real, too vivid to deny. Last night, she said she needed our help with something, I murmured. But she disappeared as soon as Jake showed up. It's so strange. My question was one Leo couldn't answer either. He just shook his head and closed the book. That night, the room was quiet. The sound of the late-night noodle cart faded into the distance, and Jake, our third roommate, was nowhere to be seen.
Jake was gone for more than 2 days. On the evening of the 3rd day, as I was walking back from campus, I spotted him. He was at a cheap dive bar near our building, the kind with plastic chairs spilling onto the sidewalk. The sound of clinking glasses and loud, obnoxious laughter filled the air. Jake sat with his feet up on a chair at a table right out front. He wasn't our broke, shabby roommate anymore. He wore a brand-new buttoned-up shirt and was cheerfully clinking beer bottles with a group of rough-looking strangers. He saw me hesitating on the other side of the street and waved me over with a boisterous, drunken gesture. "Ethan, over here, man! Join us!" Seeing his unfamiliar friends, I just shook my head, gestured that I had to go, and hurried away, a strange, unnerving feeling creeping over me. At home, he had to split a single packet of ramen to last the day. How could he have come into so much money so fast?
He finally staggered back to the room late that night, reeking of cheap beer. He collapsed onto his mattress with a weary groan, then looked over at Leo and me hunched over the mini gas stove. He let out a derisive snort. "Why didn't you come over when I called? You'd rather be here cooking whatever that is? Is there even anything in that pot to cook?" To avoid a fight, I just answered calmly. "It's not my scene, Jake. And the professor was asking about you today. Said if you miss another class, you're going to fail. You'll have to pay to retake it." Jake rolled over, burying his face in his thin pillow. His voice, muffled and thick with indifference, floated up. "Whatever. I fail, I'll retake it. What's a little more money?" Suddenly, Leo gently tugged on my sleeve. He stared straight at Jake's back, his eyes sharp and probing. "Hey, Jake," he said, his voice cutting through the stuffy air. "Did you hear what happened? Chloe's dead." Jake's body didn't even twitch. A moment later, a steady, rhythmic snoring sound began. He had passed out, or at least he wanted us to think he had.
Perhaps it was the cheap booze and greasy bar food staging a rebellion in his stomach. In the middle of the night, Jake woke with a lurch, a wave of nausea churning in his gut. He flung the door open and bolted outside. The whole apartment building shared 2 disgusting bathrooms at the far end of the hall. He ran, hand clamped over his mouth, but he didn't make it. He ended up vomiting violently at the base of the old frangipani tree, right in front of the door to apartment 8. When the heaving stopped, he felt drained and collapsed onto the cold ground, breathing heavily. The night was cold, a thin layer of dew blanketing everything in a ghostly haze. In the deep silence, he thought he heard a faint, sorrowful weeping sound coming from somewhere nearby. A shiver went down his spine. He scrambled to his feet, intending to hurry back to our room.
But something was wrong. Maybe he was still drunk. Our room was just a few steps away, right next to apartment 8. But tonight, that short stretch of hallway seemed to go on forever. He walked and walked, but the door to our room never seemed to get any closer. The locked door of apartment 8, however, loomed beside him, silent and foreboding. A vague fear began to rise in him. But some dark curiosity, some unseen force pulled him toward it. He crept closer, pressing his eye to a crack in the warped wooden panel. It was pitch black inside, except for the pale moonlight filtering through the dirty window. The air smelled of dust and mildew.
He scanned the room, and his heart stopped. In one corner, he saw a ghostly white figure lying on the bare, rickety bed frame, its back to him. Then, slowly, unnaturally, the figure turned. Its face was a waxy, pale mask with two hollow sockets, black and empty where its eyes should have been. A trail of white foam spilled from its silent mouth. Jake recoiled in horror, blinking hard. When he looked again, the figure was gone. He rubbed his eyes, trying to convince himself he was seeing things. As he stood there, trembling and confused, an ice-cold hand suddenly clamped down on his shoulder. A voice, thin and reedy, whispered directly into his ear. "Are you looking for me, Jake?" It was Chloe's voice, but not the pleasant, soft voice he knew. This one was hollow and drawn out, laced with a ghostly echo that seemed to come from a place far, far away.
Jake let out a blood-curdling scream. He flailed wildly, stumbling backward and crashing to the ground. The shriek tore through the night, and lights in the nearby apartments flicked on. Angry shouts followed. "Hey, shut up out there! People are trying to sleep!" Leo and I poked our heads out and saw Jake's pathetic state. I quickly apologized to our neighbors while Leo and I dragged our terrified, blubbering friend back into the room. "What happened?" I asked, flipping on the light. The sudden brightness made Jake squint. His face was as white as a sheet, his lips trembling. Nothing, he stammered. It was just a rat." Leo rolled his eyes and went back to his bed. A grown man screaming like that over a mouse. The room fell silent again. Leo and I quickly fell back asleep, but Jake's eyes remained wide open, staring at the dark ceiling. He pulled the thin blanket up to his chin, but it did nothing to chase away the bone-deep chill that had seeped into his very soul.
The next day, in a rare event, Jake was up early. He wasn't getting ready for school, though. When Leo and I came back from our morning classes, we found the room had been decorated. A bright yellow charm, covered in jagged red symbols, was taped to the wall above his bed. And dangling from our doorknob was a brand new 8-sided Bagua mirror. Leo frowned and reached out to take it down, but Jake, who had just walked in, stopped him. "Hey, don't! That thing was expensive. If you take it down, the charm won't work anymore." "What is all this crap, Jake?" I asked. "Why are you sticking this stuff all over the room?" I've been having trouble sleeping," he said, avoiding our eyes. "Sleep paralysis, really bad. Bought these to help me sleep better. Don't worry, it won't affect you guys."
I didn't bother arguing. Leo and I pooled our money and cooked our 2 packs of ramen, ignoring Jake's half-hearted invitation to go get drinks with him. We didn't have the money, and we certainly didn't want to accept an invitation funded by whatever dirty cash he'd gotten his hands on. That night, Jake slept soundly, his snoring filling the room. But I couldn't sleep at all. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I tossed and turned until after midnight. Thinking the room was too stuffy, I quietly got up and crept to the window, intending to crack it open for some air. As my hand touched the latch, I froze. Through the small gap, I could see a pair of pale white feet on the ground outside, wearing a pair of familiar high heels. They stood perfectly still. A shiver traced its way down my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. I called out softly, "Chloe?" My only answer was a profound, terrifying silence. But strangely, my fear began to fade, replaced by a wave of pity. My quiet affection for the kind neighbor I once knew was stronger than my fear of the dead. I slowly pushed the window open a little wider. Chloe's form materialized out of the darkness, hazy and translucent, like a column of smoke. Her face was still pale, filled with a helpless agony. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sincere. "Do you need my help?" She seemed unable to speak. She looked at me. Then her gaze shifted desperately toward the door of our apartment, specifically at the new Bagua mirror hanging there. A look of profound pain and frustration crossed her features. I asked again, but she just stood there, trapped. Then, suddenly, she dissolved into the night air as she saw Jake stir behind me. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Jake asked, his voice thick with sleep. "It's the middle of the night." I quickly shut the window and turned around, my face a mask of neutrality. "Nothing, just hot in here, getting some air." For some reason, my gut told me not to tell Jake what I had just seen. If I was going to tell anyone, it would be Leo. For the next few nights, I didn't see her directly anymore. Instead, she came to me in my dreams. Every night, it was the same chaotic, suffocating nightmare. I would see Chloe standing helplessly outside our apartment door, her mouth moving continuously, but no sound coming out. Her face was a canvas of torment and urgency, like she was trapped in a glass box, begging to be let out. I would wake up in a cold sweat every time. After 2 nights of the same dream, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I told Leo everything: the figure at the window, her fixation on the mirror, the recurring nightmares. I hoped his strange library of occult knowledge could offer some kind of explanation. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with every word. He was quiet for a long time, staring into space. Finally, he proposed a daring plan. "Tonight," he whispered, "after Jake is asleep, we'll take down the mirror and that charm. We have to." We waited. As soon as Jake's deep, steady snoring started to fill the room, Leo and I crept out of our beds. The clock on my old phone showed it was past 11 p.m. Leo clutched his prized possession, a worn-out paranormal book and 3 sticks of incense. I tiptoed to the wall and carefully peeled the yellow talisman off. The moment it came free, the oppressive atmosphere in the room seemed to lighten, becoming easier to breathe. We then slipped outside and gently lifted the Bagua mirror from the door, a strange sense of relief washing over me. Leo led the way to the door of apartment 8. He lit the 3 sticks of incense, murmured something under his breath, a passage from his book, I assumed, and planted them in a crack in the concrete at the base of the door frame. He did everything with the solemn reverence of someone trying to help a lost soul. The thin smoke didn't rise. It coiled and hung in the air like a ghostly halo. A thick white mist began to gather from nowhere, and then she appeared. This time, her image was clearer, less hazy than before, but she still kept a hesitant distance from us in the empty courtyard. I had to ask. "Chloe," I whispered, "your death, was Jake involved?" She shook her head gently, her pale lips moving. This time, her voice, though weak, was clear. Every word was audible. "No."
Both Leo and I felt 1,000-pound weight lift from our shoulders. In the darkest corners of our minds, we had both been fearing the worst about our roommate. "I only need your help," she pleaded softly, her voice filled with desperation. "I don't want to see Jake. I know he can't be trusted." We looked at each other and nodded seriously. She pointed a translucent finger toward her old room. "Under my bed, there's a floor tile that's darker than the others. Underneath it, I saved some money. Please send all of it home to my 2 children. The address is on the back of the photograph you have, Ethan." Her ghostly eyes locked onto mine. "Don't let anyone else know about this." We never imagined this was her final wish. We both nodded again, promising to do as she asked. But Leo, ever the cautious one, couldn't let it go. "Are you sure Jake had nothing to do with it, Chloe?" She looked at Leo with an expression of pity, like a sister looking at a younger brother worrying needlessly. She shook her head again, her voice tinged with a resigned sadness. "His path is a dark one. Sooner or later, trouble will find him. But my death was not his doing. Don't worry about him." With that, she bowed her head, a silent gesture of profound thanks. Then she turned and slowly faded into the thick darkness of the night. All that was left was the sweet, calming scent of the half-burnt incense. We wanted to fulfill her wish right away, but the brand-new, heavy-duty padlock Mrs. Gable had put on the door was an impassable obstacle. We decided to wait until the next night to break in. I carefully rehung the Bagua mirror and stuck the talisman back on the wall, making sure everything looked exactly as it had, so Jake wouldn't suspect a thing. As I pressed the charm to the wall, Jake suddenly grunted and shifted in his sleep, making my heart leap into my throat. But after a moment, he just rolled over and his snoring resumed. The next night, we put our plan into motion. I had borrowed a pair of bolt cutters from the campus maintenance shed. With finals over, we had nothing but time and a dreadful purpose. I positioned the jaws of the cutter around the shank of the lock and squeezed with all my might. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent night. Leo and I both flinched, our hearts pounding, cold sweat beading on our foreheads. The door creaked open into the cold, empty room. Following Chloe's instructions, we quickly located the darker tile under the bed frame. After a few minutes of prying, we managed to lift it up. Beneath it lay an old tin box. I brushed off a thick layer of dust and opened it. Inside, stacked neatly, were bundles of large denomination bills. We stared at each other, speechless. Now we understood why Chloe didn't want anyone else to know. A sum this large could make anyone's eyes turn red with greed. We carefully replaced the tile, and holding the box, we turned to leave. A figure was blocking the doorway. It was Jake. He stood with his arms crossed, a smug, contemptuous smirk on his face, a look I'd never hated more. He held out his hand, his voice dripping with mock camaraderie. "Well, well, not going to share with your roommate? How much is it? Let's split it 3 ways. I knew you two were up to something. Good thing I had to take a leak." Leo, furious, stepped forward to argue, but I put a hand on his chest, stopping him.
I shook my head, signaling for him to stay quiet, and then walked purposefully past Jake back toward our room.
Back in apartment 7, the tin box sat between us on the floor mat. The yellow light from our lamp made the stacks of cash seem sinister, seductive. I broke the silence, my voice firm as I looked Jake in the eye. I'm sending this money to Chloe's children, just like she asked. Jake laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Are you trying to fool a kid? Or are you some kind of saint now, Ethan? I said we split it 3 ways. If you don't want your share, I'll gladly take it. He then turned to Leo, his eyes gleaming. Leo, you want your cut, right? The question hung in the air. Leo stared at the money, and for a moment I saw him waver. I could see the battle in his eyes. This money was a lifeboat. It was a way out of ramen dinners and sleepless nights worrying about rent. A single share of this would make the rest of his college life a breeze. Seeing him hesitate, I quickly closed the lid of the box. My voice held no room for negotiation. No, if you don't believe me, I'll take this whole box to the police tomorrow. This belongs to her family. We can't take money from the dead. Jake lunged for the box, trying to wrestle it from me. You do that, and I'll tell Mrs. Gable we found a stash of cash in her property. Who do you think she'll believe? You with your ghost story? You think you'll ever get this money out of here? His threat was a good one, but I didn't flinch. I snatched the box away, spun around, stuffed it into my backpack, and strapped it tightly to my back. Seeing my resolve, Jake finally fell silent, though he didn't give up. He muttered a few curses under his breath and then flopped onto his bed, a malicious smile still playing on his lips. The room was quiet again. Leo sat frozen in the shadows, his eyes darting from the backpack on my shoulders to Jake's back. I knew in that brief moment of hesitation I had lost a piece of my friend, and he knew it too. He was ashamed of himself, and I was just tired, so incredibly tired. I planned to stay awake all night, guarding the backpack until I could go to the post office at dawn. I pulled out the faded photo of Chloe and her kids, tucking it safely into my shirt pocket. My thoughts drifted. She looked so young, maybe not even 30. The exhaustion from the past nights, a heavy, bone-deep weariness, finally caught up to me. My head slumped forward, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, the sun was streaming in. A feeling of unusual lightness on my back made my eyes snap open. The backpack was still there, but it was empty. The tin box was gone, and so were Jake and Leo. I didn't even have to think to know what had happened. I slumped down on my bed, burying my face in my hands, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. It wasn't just the money, it was Leo. I never thought he would be blinded by greed. I felt a wave of disappointment, but mostly I felt a profound, crushing helplessness. The truth of that night was far darker than I could have imagined. Jake, blinded by the promise of cash from a local gangster, had been the one to hold Chloe down as she fought for her life. He was the one who forced the deadly powder into the mouth of the woman who had fed him just days before. And as she lay dying and convulsing on the cold sidewalk, he had panicked. But instead of calling for help, his greed took over. He'd rifled through her purse, taking every last dollar before abandoning her and spending the night partying with his blood money. He had told himself that in a place like this, another dead party girl wouldn't raise any questions. He was wrong.
Revenge found him. As he stumbled drunkenly down a deserted street late one night, a familiar, cold hand grabbed the strap of his backpack, the backpack containing her life savings. A primal survival instinct screamed at him to let go, to run. But his insane love for the money inside was stronger than his fear of death. He held on, fighting back. That was his final mistake. He heard her whisper a single broken phrase over and over in his ear. "Take the money home." She began to pull him, dragging him backward through the streets. People passed, but no one seemed to see the terrified man being hauled away by a ghost, his screams silent to their ears. The rough asphalt tore at his clothes, then his skin, the horrifying scraping sound echoing only in his mind. He could have saved himself at any moment by simply letting go of the backpack, but he couldn't. He wouldn't. His desperate, agonizing shrieks followed the path all the way back to the Crestview apartments, but no one could save him from his own greed. I found him the next day. A soft scratching at the door woke me up. I opened it to find a broken thing lying on our welcome mat. It was Jake, but barely. His body was a canvas of dark bruises and raw abrasions, his clothes shredded, his limbs bent at unnatural angles. He was drenched in the coppery smell of blood, yet somehow he was still breathing, his chest rising and falling in shallow, painful gasps. And resting on his chest, pristine and untouched, was the backpack. Inside, I found about $8,000. Jake had already burned through the rest. I called an ambulance.
The next day at the hospital, while I was sitting by Jake's comatose form, I saw a familiar, gaunt figure hesitating at the door. It was Leo. He looked like a ghost himself, his face hollow, his eyes sunken. He nervously twisted a plastic bag in his hands, unable to take a step inside. I sighed and walked over, pulling him into the room. He shakily placed the bag on the bedside table, his voice cracking. "Help me, Ethan. She came for me. Chloe came for me." My blood ran cold. She said if I don't want to end up like Jake, I have to bring all the money back to you, every last dollar. He glanced at Jake's motionless form, and a fresh wave of terror and regret washed over his face. I opened the bag. Inside was $5,500. He'd already spent $500. Combined with what was in the backpack, we now had $13,500. We were short $1,500. Where in the world were we going to get that kind of money?
That night, we performed the ritual one last time. 3 sticks of incense planted in the same crack in the concrete. The money, back in its tin box, sat before us. We knelt there for what felt like hours, but Chloe did not appear. In a fit of desperate madness, Leo began to whisper, "Send the money home! Send the money home!" before starting to bang his head against the metal box, the dull thuds echoing in the silent courtyard. Seeing him like this, I knelt beside him, my own desperate, heartfelt plea tumbling from my lips.
Please, Chloe, we're so sorry. We were weak. We were stupid. We used $1,500 of your money. We'll send the rest tomorrow, just like you asked. And we swear we'll work to earn back what's missing and send it too. Please, we're sorry." The wind suddenly died. Leo stopped banging his head. I looked up, and on a branch of the old frangipani tree, I saw a faint white shape. It was Chloe. She tilted her head, looking down at me, and then she smiled. A gentle, peaceful smile. A soft voice, like wind chimes, whispered directly into my mind. "I believe you." And then she was gone for good. The next morning, Leo and I took the $13,500 to the post office. As the clerk counted the bills, I took the faded photograph from my pocket. I looked one last time at the radiant smile of Chloe and her 2 children, then placed it in the envelope with the money and the address. It was the only way her family would know it was from her. Leaving the post office, we felt a sense of relief, but also the heavy burden of our new debt. $1,500 isn't a small amount, I sighed. From now on, 1 ramen packet a day each. I'll find more work. Leo nodded, his eyes full of remorse. Me too. We have to pay her back. Our friendship, nearly destroyed by greed, was slowly being rebuilt on a foundation of shared responsibility. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks. I dreamt I was studying in our old room. The door opened, and Chloe walked in. She didn't speak. She just came over to my desk, sat down, and looked gently at the 4 cans of fish I had kept there. She sat for a long time, as if remembering the brief, warm moments in this grim place. Finally, she looked at me, smiled a serene, peaceful smile, and nodded, a silent farewell. Then she stood, walked to the door, and vanished into a soft light. I woke with the dawn, a strange sense of peace in my heart. I groggily got out of bed and, out of habit, glanced at my desk. My heart stopped. The 4 cans of fish were stacked neatly, and propped against them was a small stack of cash. I walked closer, my hands trembling. 15 $100 bills, $1,500, and holding the money down was the photograph of Chloe and her 2 children. The very same photo that should have been in an envelope halfway across the country. I picked up the picture, thinking of her short, tragic, misguided life, and tears streamed down my face. I understood. It was a gift. She didn't need us to repay the debt. She had accepted our remorse. This was her final thank you to the one little brother who hadn't been blinded by greed, who had simply, truly wanted to help her. The story of the neighbor in apartment 8 ended not with terror or a haunting, but with a strange, lingering warmth, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of life, kindness and integrity are the most precious lights of all.